We are back here on the Lynn Hayes Freeland Show. Some folks would say we are living in some troubled times. Here to talk about that and much more is Lou Ransom, our favorite editorialist. Welcome back to the show. And I want to just pick up, I mean, you talked about in the last segment that you had kind of done the research and the closest Confederate statue would have been in Gettysburg. I want to go back to that controversial press conference that the president had. And what did him bringing up Washington, and Jefferson, what did that really say? Read between the lines for me on that.
It really meant that he has no sense of history, no understanding of the difference between Washington and Jefferson and Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis. You know, neither Washington nor Jefferson, while they did own slaves, neither of them declared war on the United States and fought against the United States. He doesn't see that difference, and for him to think that that's just a cultural thing or a heritage thing shows that he's aligned with some of the entities in the United States who really believe that the South's going to rise again. You know, and that it was an unjust war, and you Northerners, you hear it through their administration, that whole cosmopolitan Easterner comment that Stephen Miller said.
Oh, okay.
You know, that anti-intellectualism, you know, and a lot of people have bought into that and said that that's one of the reasons why they don't trust Washington, because they're too smart. You know, who does that? Who says that somebody is too smart? You know, and that's really what that is. And it's bothersome, but I like to think that we can fix it. You know, I have to apologize because when Trump won, I said, people were asking me, say, well, isn't this terrible? Well, you know, we survived 8 years of George Bush. We can survive 8 years of Donald Trump. And I said, well, some people didn't survive 8 years of George Bush because we had a couple wars and we had Katrina and we had a whole lot of other things, you know, but I don't know that we've actually survived 6 months of Donald Trump. You know, I mean, that's how, you know, you talk about Korea and Venezuela and you know, who does these kinds of things and said, well, it shouldn't be a surprise because that's what he said he was going to do.
That's what he said he was going to do.
And
to that point, really, everything that we're seeing, we knew was there, was possible.
Absolutely. Like I said, when he said, "I alone can fix it," he meant that. He meant that he was the only one that could do it, and that didn't mean I with
my team.
With Pence, I with, you know, he said me, just me, you know, and that's the only counsel he takes, you know, other than watching Fox and Friends, you know, and so he if that's all he's going to listen to, then we should have listened to him, you know, because he was telling you exactly what he was going to do and exactly who he was.
Let me ask you this, because I know you're a grandfather, you have grandchildren, I have a grandson. Mine is too young to know anything about what's going on. But you have older grandchildren. Yes. How do you even begin to explain to them the times that we live in? Or do you?
Well, not really. I don't really explain that to them. I'm amazed, however, at how much they pick up. Because my 5-year-old granddaughter says, we got to get rid of Donald Trump. Where'd you come from? You know, say you can't even vote yet. You know, and just from picking up what other people say and watching TV or those kind of things. So you have to kind of put things in perspective and make sure that they understand that while I believe that Donald Trump is a bad man, we don't want anything to happen to him, and that he's the president, he got elected. Say, but these are the things that we look at and say these are bad. And so she understands what's good and what's bad.
Good and what's bad.
And that's about as far as you can go with it at this point.
And I guess what made me ask that question was, I mean, certainly when I was growing up, it was the visual of Klansmen in hoods. Everybody knew what that meant. Then we've had like this whole generation that has no connection, has no idea, and now we got to talk about people with tiki lamps.
Yeah. Well, you know, we do have to make sure that we keep the history involved in that, and there is a lot of revisionist stuff going out, but this has been always been a strong area for that kind of activism, for civil rights activism. So we need to make sure that that tradition continues, so that people are used to going out and speaking their minds and protesting against things that don't go well. I grew up, you know, I was 10 when they had the March on Washington. I didn't know anything about it, you know, but I was 10, you know, but I was also 10 when Kennedy was shot. You know, and I look back on that and I said, well, that really changed my outlook on the world, and I've been able to carry that with me. You know, I'm hoping that my children and their children are carrying this stuff with them, and it's up to me to put it in perspective and let them know that things can change. Things haven't changed as much as we'd like, but things can change.
Can change.
You know, because except for the last 8 months, all of them only knew one president.
Right.
And that was Barack Obama. You know, and so for them, that's no big deal.
Right.
You know, well, aren't all the presidents black? No, no. So things can change, and I think we're going to weather this, and we'll keep moving on. But we have to do the work.
We got to take a commercial break. I hope we have time when we come back, because I got a follow-up question, and we'll see. Don't go away when the Lynn Hayes Freeland Show continues.